This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. Now, we have two podcasts called Avoid the Maze, but this one has an added ingredient to it because when I invited our guest, Tracee Garner, to join me today, I asked her to be on this particular podcast because she is special. She has learned how to navigate her life. And so many of us are sitting around wondering, how did we get to where we are? And is this all there is in life? Tracee is a best-selling author, she's a speaker, and she's a disability advocate. And in today's world, Tracee, being a disability advocate, you should have a halo over your head because I'll tell you, we're living in a world with so many people of different abilities. And it's not that we want to look at the disability, but we want to at least recognize it and say, okay, maybe you can't do it this way, but what way can you do something? So take us on your journey because I am sure that you are going to hit the button on so many of our listeners today. Your sound, we lost your sound.
How's that?
There you go. Oh,
I'm so sorry. Thank you
no,
so
that's
much.
okay. Technical issues happen all the time. No problem.
Great, great. Yes. And that's our whole life, right? A
Right.
technical issue. Well, I want to thank you again, Karen, for having me, first of all. And you're right. Advocacy is everyone is advocating for something. We all have passion and lived experiences that cause us to find what our passion is. You speak up about things that you are for or against. And so I hope that everyone has at least something that they're passionate about and that they can advocate for. And mine just happens to be disability rights and civil rights. But my journey began really in my writing life. I was diagnosed at 2 years old with muscular dystrophy. So I'm really, in reality, I've always had it. I didn't acquire my disability at a later time. I just grew up with it and learned to adapt to it. But it wasn't until I was happy-go-lucky, probably all the way through K through 12. This is me. I'm outgoing. I'm an optimist, and things are wonderful. And I work with my disability as best I can. But I have a form of muscular dystrophy, and I do use a wheelchair full time just to give people kind of a visual. But when I graduated from high school and went into a really big college, too big, I had a really hard time. And it was then that I discovered my love for writing because I would escape to my own little world. And I've always escaped, which is weird because even when I was in elementary school, junior high, and I don't think we had recess in high school, but I remember in elementary school and junior high when everybody was out playing, I was inside, creating my own world. The playground was inaccessible. I actually fell once in elementary school, coming down off a playground in my wheelchair, and it wasn't built correctly. Like now, playgrounds are wonderful for all kinds of kids who use wheelchairs and everything. But back then, my the wheel on my wheelchair hit a steep curb, and my wheelchair actually flipped over on top of me. And I was belted in and I was aware and I knew what was going on. And I was like, take my seatbelt off, take my seatbelt off. They were trying to like lift the chair. And I was
Oh,
like, I'm belted in, like, please, like, please, like, come on, somebody at an engineering degree can help me. So, so that, just kind of made me afraid, I think. And so I stayed indoors and stayed away from playgrounds, especially if they're going to like try to kill me. But when I was inside, I was creating my own world. I would write, I would read a book. The teachers tried to be creative and find something for me to do. But for the most part, I just created, these kind of worlds where everything was accessible to me. And I did that again in college in math class. Math class became recess because I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't do anything. I didn't understand the math problem that the teacher was going over. So on the back of my math sheet, I remember just writing a little story. In college, I had also been rejected. I was failing my academics, rejected by a guy that I liked, and a couple other things, just not being able to, not feeling good enough. And so that just led me to create my own world and do my own thing and enter my first story into a contest, which I won. I got a trip to New York and I got an advance, which was a lot to a 20 something year old. And I got my first book deal. And it just really changed my life and gave me such confidence. It really helped me um, grow, to be validated over my creative pursuit and my creative ability for other people to recognize, say, wow, this was a really good story that you entered and you won. I was the only one of all the people that and they made an anthology, which was myself and three other authors. So it was just such a fun time, but it was, a time of discovery, a
Sure.
time of a little hardship to kind of, that's like that diamond in the rough, kind of roughing up against, the edges and the sharpness of life and trying to break through, trying to emerge as a person, a whole person, a confident person and just become well-rounded. And I will also say that as I'm getting older, disability is really starting to rear its ugly head. Aging is no joke,
Right.
without a disability, right? My mom's like, it's hard out here, even if you don't have a disability, all the time. She tells me that. And I'm like, okay, but it's 10 times harder with it. So, just navigating those things and coming to terms with, with my life and some limitations. And for the most part, everything goes smoothly. I try to orchestrate things as best I can. But of course, there are things caregivers don't show up on time, or, I'm late for this, or the van breaks down, or, not being able to go where I want to go sometimes as far as travel and using the plane and all that. But for the most part, I've learned to really adapt to my situation and kind of master it. And it just takes what I've always, I'm writing a book now, a children's book called The Might in My Mind. And it really is about how you're using your mind to turn things around. This little girl in my book is excited about a speech that she's going to give for the day. And, she's so excited. She puts on her little special outfit. She has everything ready to go. And during lunch, a friend spills his entire lunch on her
Oh, wow.
and it's about teaching children that you have the power. She could blow up, she could have a tantrum. She is a child, remember, and kids don't always know how to master their emotions. And but she's going to be okay. And with a pep talk in the bathroom from her friends, she's gonna mentally turn it around and still do her speech and do everything that she needs to do. And that's how I look at my life. My mind is kind of the trigger when, especially when my physical doesn't work properly. So I use my mind to really turn things around for me.
I love the story that you just told because my son, my youngest son, is on the autism spectrum,
Mhm.
very high functioning. Typically, you wouldn't know if you met him that he was autistic. He loves music. So every year for the talent show, he prepared something and went on stage and did great. This one year, he had put on a lot of weight due to medication. So the kids were teasing him
Mhm.
senselessly,
Mhm.
but he still wanted to perform. So he got out there to perform. And when he came out on the stage, they did not time his music properly.
Mhm.
And it threw him off.
Right.
And he just threw his hands up in the air, walked behind the curtain. But what he said to everybody was, put me on later. Just give me time.
Mhm.
I didn't think he was ever going to go back on,
Yeah.
but he created a scenario in his head.
Mhm.
Okay, when I go back on, This is what's going to happen. Luckily, the music got cued. He got on. He did great.
Mhm.
We don't
Wonderful.
give children enough confidence in what they
Hmm.
can and can't do.
Right.
And some disabilities we can see.
Hmm.
You're in a wheelchair, so we know that there is something that is going on there, why you're
Right.
not up and walking.
Hmm.
My son, like I said, looked neurotypical, mostly acted neurotypical. However, when things didn't fire properly, like that song, he had his little meltdown.
Right.
How do you, I mean, you knew at a young age, this is who you are at
Hmm.
2 years old. It's not like you woke up 20 years later and all of a
Right.
sudden my body's not working in the way I'd like to. How was it for your parents and those around you to
Hmm.
guide you into being the independent Tracee that you are?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I really think it comes down to faith. My dad was a pastor when he was living. He was ordained when in his early 20s, an ordained minister. And I think they instilled in me faith. But I'll also say that, I always remember my parents when the doctors would talk to them. They would kind of, it was almost funny. Like people say, they get a diagnosis and they go home and they cry. I never saw my parents cry really about anything. I remember somebody totaled the van that my family had for me. My van was parked on the street and somebody rammed it. I think they were drunk or something. And this is a very expensive ramp van
Yep.
for me and my wheelchair. And my parents had their cars, but they had a van for me. And that was the first time I saw my dad cry because it was like, here's something we have for my child. It's already a struggle to finance this and to get it. And that was the first time, but never through any of the diagnoses. They acted like it was a normal day. They honestly, I believe they took what the doctor said. And funny enough, my mom tells this story all the time that the doctor said I would have trouble with my hands and writing. She specifically said trouble with my hands and writing. And I don't know where she is today, but I've written 20 books, right?
Yeah.
So I wish doctors would stop giving this kind of dismal, outlook and prognosis because so many of their patients could really do thrive. They never have any success stories about, oh, I have this other patient that, is similar to you and she's doing really, really good. I don't know if they don't want to create a comparison scenario, but that would give so many people hope. So I think it was their reaction or lack thereof to anything that they heard a MD or anybody in the medical field tell them. And they just went on about their business. Like, we heard what you said. That's well and good. And here's what we're going to do, in spite of you. So I think that they had their own might in their mind and they passed it on to me, but also prayer and faith. And, my mom made me do regular things. She would give me, we always have a saying in our house, if you can't fold a towel, fold a washcloth. So she would dump these warm, fun towels. It's like a game at first until she's like, okay, fold those. And I'd be like complaining, like, oh, the towel is too big. I can't fold it. It's so long. And then every laundry day, she would dump a bunch of washcloths on me because washcloths were smaller for my dexterity. Most parents would probably just say, oh, well, laundry is not going to be something you can do. But, to this day, not as much because I'm working during the day. But if she had her way, I'd still be folding some washcloths right about now, or at least once a week. But my point is that she didn't take the whole thing away. Like, okay, laundry is not going to be it for you. Your hands are weak. She challenged me and gave me an alternative. And I think a lot of parents today are just like, oh, he can't do that. Oh, she can't do that. We're not going to do that. And you only tried it once. You have to be creative and do other things. What I'll also say by some parents, are further disabling their children by not seeing what they can do. So many people want to get their child on Social Security. And make no mistake, there is nothing wrong with getting the entitlement benefits that you are entitled to, right? But you haven't seen if little Johnny or Susie can hold a job. You're just saying in your own mind, oh no, they'll never be able to work. When you really don't know, with some coaching, with some supports, okay, they can't make, $80,000 a year and work 50 to 60 hours a week. But that work, even 2 to 4 hours a day, is going to be dignifying, is going to give them social outlook, social abilities, and is also going to help them create friendships as opposed to sitting at home playing video games all day. And isolation and loneliness is a huge issue for people, 30 with disabilities, 30 to 85. And it's the killer, the sedentary lifestyle, not having anything to look forward to. So what? They take a special bus to get to their little 2 hour, job. And maybe it's even just 2 hours of volunteering every day. It is something, it is routine, it is regimented. They have to interact with other people. They're not just home with you, living in a bubble. So my parents challenged me, and other parents should challenge their children and just keep thinking about things that they can try to do until you find the real brick wall that they can't do it, but at least you've exhausted several different iterations of doing something.
Sure. It's interesting. When my son was 11 years old, we had learned that he was entitled to services through the mental health organizations. And we contacted them. And what was great about it is they looked at what his abilities were. He was an A student, so academics wasn't the issue. But he loved sports, and specifically baseball. And most teams didn't want him because they assumed that if he didn't hit the ball, if he didn't run fast enough, he was going to have a meltdown. So instead, he took baseball lessons and excelled at it. And he was happy because he was into something that he could do. About a year later, he had to go through a psychological evaluation. And the therapist determined he was not going to be able to do anything for the rest of his life. And she said in front of him, yet 12 years old, forget sports. You're never going to play. You're never going to be involved. She went through a whole list of things. And then she said, you see that young man out there pushing that broom? That is you in the future. My husband ran out of the room. He was furious.
Right.
I was sitting there and I was shocked that anybody would deliver this kind of message. And my son stood up and he said, you don't know me. And he went out of the room and went to his dad. I'm sitting there. Now I got berated. My husband wasn't a nice guy. Look what he did. That my son now was anxious. And I looked at her and I said, don't tell him what he can't do.
Right.
We focus on what he can do. And all of us have deficits. It doesn't make any difference. And he went from that day forward to prove to her, number one, he graduated high school, he went to college, he's living on his own, he's working in sports.
Right. That's so great.
I could have, as a parent, said, you're the authority. I'm going to listen to you. Instead, what I said to myself was, I'm going to help him prepare to be the best that he can be in his way.
Right.
And that's what I think is so important when we are out in public, that we have to stop looking the other way. If we see Tracee sitting in her chair, why can't we have a conversation with her?
That's right.
The chair is not a wall, okay? If we see somebody who is going through a meltdown, let's not assume anything.
Right.
Maybe the noise is too loud, maybe it's too bright, or
Mhm.
maybe somebody says something very rude to them. So you've taken your voice, you've been writing many, many books.
Yes.
Um, how do you see yourself helping others? Because I can hear it in your voice that this is what your mission is.
Hmm. Hmm. I see myself helping others, one, just by just being present. There are so many things that I go to. I'm often the only African American woman there. I'm also always the only person who uses a wheelchair and has a visible disability. So I just try to keep showing up. Sometimes I don't want to go because I'm worried about the cliquish nature of things and everybody kind of, standing around, nobody wanting to come over, sit down, have a conversation. But I don't let that stop me. Sometimes I can use that to my advantage to say, wow, look, she's out and about. I need to bring, so and so. My son has a disability, or my daughter, and, I should bring them to things. And I'm always advocating that people bring their family members, regardless of whatever, behavioral issues they have, bring them out. They can only get better and learn more social interaction and appropriate behavior by watching others. So bring them in. Other people need to become more tolerant by
Right.
seeing us. Sometimes when I'm in my van, people just stop and stare, about to walk into a pole, looking at me. And I'm just thinking, you guys got to get out more. There's
Yeah.
more of us everywhere. But I know that, it's just astounding to me that there's still so much staring. And I know, like, I drive a unique van and the ramp and the door opens automatically and all this magical things, I guess, kind of happen for them. But, be visible. That's the first thing. And then be vocal, is the second thing. If you're going to attend, if you're going to come, then speak up and let people hear your voice. And then I just try to demonstrate, that I'm working in addition to my books. I have a full-time job, at a health and human service agency. So I'm working full-time. I've been working since I was 16, and it was a legal age to work. And I did my internships and did different things. And so, and then there's so many resources out here. I was actually in the workforce recruitment program. That program, actually, the department of, I forget which department it is, it might be education or one of those departments, paid my salary just so that the organization, which was a defense agency at the time, a government contractor, could see that people with disabilities could work. That should not be a thing.
No.
Like they should pay money to us out of their own pocket. But I understood the concept, which is a way for you to get a disabled person in the door without you having to pay for them and see that, wow, they really are. And I got hired full time after that, which means it was a demonstration kind of, that I could work and contribute after they got me as a free, paid by
Sure.
somebody else, a free commodity, if you will. So, and I think that program still exists, and it's a wonderful program. I benefited from it. They paid me what they were paying to everybody else, and but we shouldn't still be at a point where we have to do that. That's the part that I lament. I want the program to continue, but every agency that has the money to pay everybody else should also pay people with disabilities a fair
Absolutely.
and living wage. So there's that. So be present, be vocal, show up. So many programs to help you go to things, to do things that you want to do. I drive my own accessible modified vehicle, and some of that I had to pay some with my family's help. But some of it, the modifications were paid for by vocational rehabilitation, which is a program in every state. And so, take advantage of those programs.
Absolutely.
The first time I got my van, more than 19 years ago, I got denied 7 times. And that ate up so many years of my life. I was mad. But my dad went with me when he was living, like the last time that I got denied. And he said, he helped me get a new counselor. As soon as I got a new counselor, I got approved for the money. But the other thing is that they invited me down to one of their little conferences and they gave me a tenacity award. It's like they rewarded me for taking them to task. And I didn't know I was getting an award. My counselor just said, "Hey, you want to come down for a few hours and, we want to see your van." And then I was sitting there and they're like, "And now we're going to present the Tenacity Award to Tracee Garner." And I was like, my gosh, like seriously? And I actually wish my speech had been better. Like I should have said something like, I shouldn't have had to been denied 7 times. I didn't. I accepted my award and I, kindly thanked them and everything. But, it's just so funny. It's like, if I hadn't advocated, if I hadn't have spoke up, other people wouldn't have spoken up. I wouldn't have got the award, which was, a token thing to me. It wasn't a huge deal. But my point is that you have to keep, most people, when they are denied something, they give up.
Yep.
Nobody that I know has been to bat 7 times, which actually was almost 7 years because I had to wait and I had to do the appeals process. And the other thing that, hurt so bad and made me so bad is that with a degenerative, these are the doctor's terms, degenerative muscular dystrophy, um, my muscles are getting weaker. And that was their whole question. Like, they have to get doctor's notes, you have to have proof, you have to have a PT, OT, even different kinds of evaluations just to get the things that everybody else gets so easily. And so that was hard. It was a really hard time. It was depressing. But again, my mind and my might, just sticking to it, they let me appeal. I kept appealing, and just a lie. And then even one time during that time, my parents had the money with the van to pay our portion, ready to go. And then 7 years down the line, we don't have any money, right, in order to pay our portion, and kind of scraping and having to get everything together. And it's just so unnecessary for the bureaucracy and the denials that happened over what? I don't even remember what the reasons were. But obviously there weren't any good reasons if I eventually, would get approved. And so that's another thing I tell people, get a new counselor sooner than I did. Don't wait for him or her to deny you 7 times. Ask for one, ask for a different one as soon as you can. So that person retired, and I was able to get, a different person who took over my case. And I probably took advantage of they were green and didn't know what they were doing.
Sure.
But I had been here or ring around the rosy 7 times. I knew what I wanted, and I want you to help me do this. And just stand up for yourself, speak up for yourself.
Well,
This is your life.
and you have to advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
You know what your abilities are
Mhm.
and what your limitations are.
Right.
And, I stop and think sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed this, but on all job applications, there's this whole list,
Mhm.
identify your disability.
Right.
And on there is diabetes, which none of us would have thought of that as a disability, but
Right.
okay, somehow there's autism, there's ADHD. And you
Mhm.
look at it and it's like, well, all of us have to check this off. So
Right.
we're all disabled.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we have to look when we see you in your wheelchair, we have to say, look what she can do. And she can do it. Number one, you had great support from your family,
It did.
which a lot of people don't, but you
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
And you have the will to live your life to the fullest.
Right.
If if you don't care about how you're living your life,
Mhm.
it's your choice.
Right.
But when there's someone like Tracee out there who's advocating for you, who's telling you that there's a lot out there that's available, you may have to
So
work
much.
hard at getting it.
Yes, you have to
But
apply for it, and it's paperwork.
yep. And a lot of people don't want to do the paperwork.
Yes, yes. And a
And
lot of people are intimidated by it, but there's somebody who out there. I took a spiritual gifts class, and one of my gifts is administrative helps. So that's why I do at work. I do all the Social Security applications and all the SNAP and all Medicaid, Medicare, all the applications. So just find someone. There's help out there, even if you don't have family that will help you. Find a surrogate, find a sponsor, somebody that knows how to do that stuff, and they will help you do it. There's more than just your family. If your family falls down on you, there's more people who are willing to help, and you really have to get outside yourself and look outside yourself. And it's hard to ask for help. Trust
Oh
me,
my
I
God.
die on the independence hill sometimes trying to do everything myself, but there are people who really want to help and would love to.
So you brought up a number of the government agencies, and I know most of us are still in question which ones are really still running.
Mhm.
Is there still money available? How do you suggest that people not be afraid to delve into the agencies to find out what is available
Mhm.
and how you qualify?
Yeah, well, I love my Centers for Independent Living. I work for one, obviously, and there's 400 Centers for Independent Living around the country. So whatever state you're in, you should be able to find one. That is the first place. Even when I got out of high school, before I started actually working there, I would call them and be like, well, I need transportation. How do I find it? And the other thing is that, while there's a lot of talk of things going away, of money being lost, it's not lost yet in a lot of agencies. They still have it. So you apply until they say you can't apply. And
Okay.
then you look for another application and you apply for that one. So don't let what kind of the chatter and the noise discourage you, because I actually think it's more of a discouragement tactic than anything. They just don't want you to apply. They don't even want you to print out the paper and put your name and date of birth on there. So I think it's more intimidation to reduce, because some of the people probably aren't applying by what they're hearing. Some people probably haven't even tried. And they're still taking applications at the Social Security's office. I just did one the other day and I continue to refer people. So keep going until find a roadblock, and then you find another way around. So don't listen to the noise. I'm a news junkie, so I can't help but listen to it, but I'm also listening to it for story ideas. So, even though they're saying so much, this isn't available, this is cut, a lot of people also don't know that a lot of people that were fired were actually rehired. But you don't hear that part often. You just hear of mass firings, mass this, mass that, even mass deportations, which we know is a thing. But I still have some caregivers who are, Latino and haven't been deported, and they come to work every day, and they're going to keep coming until they're gone. So, which would be sad. And I, totally try to help them, and have actually spoke for one of them in court. So I also, advocate for people who are helping me every
Sure.
day, so keep applying until you cannot, until you're physically told no or rejected in some way, but put it forth no matter what.
I'm so glad that I asked you the question because, again, most of us are living in this bubble. We don't know. And if we don't need to apply for ourselves or for family members, we're only hearing the negative part. Hey, it's
Right.
not available.
Mhm.
Um, Before we wrap this up, at 2 years old, you're identified with MD. Many of us grew up watching Jerry Lewis and the
Yes.
telethon years after year after year. And many of us believed that these children weren't living into adulthood.
Mhm.
Is it because there is better treatment today for the disease that children are living longer? Or are there different forms of this disease that, allows
Mhm.
for a longer lifespan?
I think it's a little bit of both. What I want to say first is that anyone who has a negative connotation, especially we as people with disabilities, most of us, I didn't, I liked the telethon. But you have to portray people in a certain way for you to reach into your pocket and
Right.
give money, right? If you showed us as successful, people who are thriving, nobody would give us money. I'm driving my own car. Nobody's going to give me a couple dollars of gas money. They're like, you're doing fine. Keep going. When I really could use $20 of gas money. But my point is that when you see people being successful, we have no thought about them whatsoever. So what do? We show, illness and sickness. And I will say for families who have a new diagnosis, most of them don't have money until their children are older. All the treatments, going back and forth to the doctor, people aren't given an accessible ramp van, when your child is 2 years old and newly diagnosed. My dad, actually lifted me even when I got chubby up until 10 years old, lifted me out of my chair and put me in the van seat. And then him and my brother put my wheelchair in the back. That was physically taxing. But nobody would think, oh, they need help. They need a ramp van. And that was the only way for the muscular dystrophy and all those associations to really go after money and get you. We are not moved unless we see, kind of this, unfavorable sickness, illness. But to your question, yes, there are more treatments. There are more studies and things that are helping people. But what I will say also is that people still need money because treatments are only really done by the sheer number of years they've been doing it. A treatment and a cure is only going to probably come for people who are not me, for the babies, for people who are 2 and 4 years old. They're the ones who are going to be able to get the treatment. I may be considered too old and aged out of the treatment. So we still need money for studies. And we need to remember that all the cures are not going to come at once. There'll be a cure for maybe one little strand, or this people, or Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or ataxia, Friedreich's ataxia, or something like that. So we still need funding, we still need money. But I also wish that even though most of the money goes to research, I wish we could, like, Muscular Dystrophy Association used to pay for a new bed when you were diagnosed, like an adjustable bed. And they also used to pay $500 towards fixing your wheelchair. And some of that money has dried up in for the sake of research. More money goes to research than it goes to helping families sometimes. So, so yes, I'm elaborating a little bit, but to your point, more treatments, and honestly, I think just more optimism, more parents kind of, getting in there and researching. What can I do for my child? You did that, with your own child, probably. People who are on the spectrum, diet, different things that they can do, exercise, speech pathologists, getting those things early intervention is key because you also can diagnose it sooner. When you see that there is an issue, you start to, create the supports and you learn all you can. So I think parents today, especially like millennial parents, Gen, probably, I always forget where Gen I am, but the X and the Y,
Yep.
they have a little bit more time and a little bit more disposable income to get some of the therapy supports that their children need. Whereas my parents didn't have, money for basically anything.
Right.
No major babysitters, no this, no that, no behavioral therapy. So that is one good thing. With more disposable income, you can get more treatment and help mitigate some of the fallout that'll happen if you don't. And then getting it at an early age, getting, speech, even when they're 2 and they really can't form sentences anyway, but starting to just condition them to have the supports that they need and be able to pay for them is really key too.
Well, I certainly appreciate all the insight you've given us today. I'm hoping that our listeners are going to, dig deep into themselves and start learning how to respect others much
Yeah.
better than we do. Let's stop putting labels on people. Okay. Um, I I read your bio. I met you for the first time today, and I don't care how you get around. I'm ecstatic that you do get around, that you know how to navigate, that you are embracing life like anyone else. And I sometimes get frustrated when people will either meet my son or somebody else on the spectrum and make an assumption that,
Right.
oh, they can only do X.
Mhm.
No, we can all
So
do
much
a lot
more.
more. And
Yes.
understanding also how these charities work.
Mhm.
As soon as you said this is what they have to display to get to your heartstrings and get you to reach into your pocket, sadly, that's true.
Mhm.
Um, so I understand why they've done that in the past, but I think now we have to start being more accepting and helping each other out.
Right. Regardless. Yes.
How can my listeners follow you and find you, and especially learn about all your books and start reading
Sure.
them?
Yeah, thank you so much. It is go to my website at traceegarner.com. That's Tracee Garner.com. And I'm also active on Instagram and Facebook mostly. So and my full name, Tracee Lydia Garner, is for my in my Instagram, which I love. So just email me, text, whatever, and I always respond. And I'd love to hear from some of your listeners.
Wonderful. And all that information will be in the show notes. So there's no excuse to say you couldn't get through to Tracee. And I just want to wish you the best. Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Karen. Sure.
Bye now.
Bye.